Ernesto de la Cruz and Dawn Bellwether both wore masks of charm and trust. One dazzled his world with fame, the other hid in plain sight behind paperwork. Yet, when their truths surfaced, only one left a mark that changed everything. Ernesto's betrayal deepened Coco. Bellwether's reveal barely made any mark in Zootopia. So what made one unforgettable and the other forgettable? How did Ernesto succeed where Bellwether failed? The first thing to understand about how Ernesto de la Cruz succeeds where Bellwether failed is to look at how these two earned the trust of the audience, or at least tried to, because betrayal only hurts when it comes from someone we believed in. In fact, the whole idea of the twist villain is to break the trust of the audience. In psychology, trust and betrayal are often seen as two sides of the same emotional coin. Trust is built on a sense of predictability and emotional investment. It's the belief that someone or something will act in a way that aligns with your expectations or your well-being. The brain releases oxytocin when we feel trust, the same hormone tied to bonding and attachment. That's why trust feels warm and steady. It gives the illusion of safety. Betrayal hurts so deeply because it breaks that illusion. Ernesto is a masterpiece in how to create the illusion of trust. In Coco, he was introduced as the greatest musician of all time. He is built as trustworthy and credible by the story long before he even speaks. His face is everywhere, songs about him play every time, and statues are erected in his honor.
He starred in movies, he had the coolest guitar, he could fly!
That repeated, loving exposure is essential because it buys him a deep kind of trust. The more often we see someone, hear about them, or interact with them, the more familiar they become. This is known as the mere exposure effect. The simple fact that repeated presence increases likability and trust. When the camera shows an old film clip of Ernesto singing or acting, you see a culture that has decided he matters. You see Miguel's whole identity lined up behind that smile. On the other hand, Zootopia is a buddy cop story set in a city where animals have evolved to live like humans. It follows Judy Hopps, a small-town rabbit who dreams of becoming the first bunny police officer in a world run by bigger, tougher predators. When predators across the city start going savage, she teams up with a sly fox named Nick Wilde to solve the mystery. What starts as a cute animal adventure turns into a sharp story about prejudice, fear, and how easy it is for power to use division to stay in control. Bellwether was found somewhere in all this animal mess. She starts small and is designed to be overlooked. Her voice, delivered by Jenny Slate, is deliberately pitched small, meant to feel like a timid person.
Well, I'd say the case is in good hands.
She is also tiny and fits the movie's approach of invisibility for the prey class. That design is intentional because the film wants you to underestimate her, so the reveal lands. Bellwether is the assistant mayor to a powerful predator, Mayor Lionheart, but she is essentially a figurehead. She is mocked by the mayor, who calls her Smellweather, and even gives her a humiliating mug which she pretends to appreciate. These small, embarrassing moments reflect a workplace where she is undervalued and ridiculed, despite her title. Both villains, then, were engineered to be overlooked. Ernesto by fame, Bellwether by sheer insignificance. That's a great initial setup. But there is a problem. Underestimating a character is not the same as investing in them, because trust is a pattern a story must compel you to follow. In Coco, the pattern is relentless. A child watches videos, touches memorabilia, and sings Ernesto's songs over and over. The movie trains you to love Ernesto the way Miguel loves him. It lets you live inside that worship. That makes the twist brutal. Whereas Bellwether is mostly seen on the periphery. She earns sympathy by being small, and that sympathy is useful for a twist. But sympathy is not the same as attachment. The film gives us a reason to root for Judy and to worry about predators and prey, but fails to give us a reason to trust Bellwether the same way it gives Miguel reason to trust Ernesto. Bellwether is treated like an extra, a character just there to fill space. She appears in only 6 scenes before her major reveal. Her name is mentioned a mere 7 times in the entire movie. Even Miguel's dog, Dante, a sidekick, not the villain, is mentioned almost 30 times. Dante, the goofy dog, even gets a more reasonable character arc and more screen time mentions than the actual main villain of an entire story. That's insane. A character who's consistently present in the story, someone the audience sees, hears, and associates with good feelings, naturally earns their trust. That's why Ernesto de la Cruz's betrayal hits so hard. The film keeps him alive in our minds long before he enters the frame. So, when the truth lands, it feels personal. Bellwether, on the other hand, lacks that psychological buildup. She's there, but not present. Without repeated exposure, the brain never forms the trust needed for real betrayal, only surprise. And that's one way Ernesto succeeded where the sheep failed. But presence and trust alone are not enough reasons to write off Bellwether completely. There's one other thing a character needs that Bellwether didn't have. A twist villain also needs relevance. They have to matter to the story in a way that shapes the hero's journey and the film's message. This is where Bellwether's character in Zootopia collapses. Her lack of presence was already a problem, but what truly made her forgettable was that she wasn't relevant to the emotional or thematic core of the movie. Whether she appeared 10 times or 100 wouldn't have changed anything, because she didn't carry the story in any meaningful way. The audience could remove her entirely, and the film would still deliver the same message about prejudice and fear through Judy and Nick's relationship. That says everything. You might be thinking that's counterintuitive. After all, if the villain has no presence, how can they be relevant? The truth is, presence and relevance don't always rely on screen time for any character. Take Mama Coco, for example. The movie is literally named after her, yet Mama Coco barely speaks and spends most of the story lost in memory. Quiet, distant, and almost forgotten by the world around her. However, she is the most relevant character in the whole film. The song Remember Me was written for her, and Hector's entire devastating fate is tied directly to his desire to see her again. Mama Coco didn't need 1,000 lines of dialogue to be the emotional heart of the story. Bellwether doesn't drive the conflict in Zootopia because it is well spelled out. She is just reiterating it. The predator-prey tension that fuels the story is already alive through Judy's personal struggle and Nick's cynicism. By the time she steps in, the audience already understands what the film is trying to say. It's like she's reading a thesis paper at the end of a story that already made its point through action and emotion.
Think of it. 90% of the population united against a common enemy.
Now, compare this to Ernesto de la Cruz. Everything in Coco begins and ends with him. His motto, "Seize your moment," becomes a prophecy for the story. Ernesto seizes the spotlight, the music, even another man's life. He is the emotional anchor around which Miguel builds his entire belief system. The kid has a whole hidden room dedicated to the musical icon. From the moment Miguel watches those old recordings of Ernesto mimicking his moves and learning his songs, the movie ties Miguel's dream directly to him. So, when Ernesto's true nature is revealed, it breaks Miguel's entire sense of self. The boy loses a hero and his idea of who he wants to become. That's a wound that goes beyond disappointment. It's identity collapse. And the movie uses that collapse to rebuild him in a truer image, reconnecting him with the family he's been at odds with. Even Hector's salvation, which becomes the heart of the film's emotional climax, is a byproduct of Ernesto's actions. If Miguel hadn't chased the dream of meeting Ernesto, he never would have met Hector, and Hector would have been forgotten forever. Ernesto sits at the center of every emotional thread, even when he isn't on screen. That's relevance. There's also something quietly profound about how Ernesto's crimes ripple through generations. His murder of Hector robbed an entire family of music. The Rivera family's ban on the art was born from that single act, passed down like a curse.
I'm supposed to play music.
Never! That man's music was a curse! We'll not allow it!
Decades of bitterness, lost dreams, and alienation, all because one man chose selfishness over friendship. That's storytelling that understands consequence. Every melody in Coco is haunted by Ernesto's villainy. Even Imelda's anger and Miguel's defiance trace back to him. Ernesto's relevance stretches across time, binding every emotional beat of the film together. Now think about Bellwether again. How many story threads truly depend on her existence? Remove her, and the themes of Zootopia, bias, fear, and the complexity of social harmony still stand strong. Judy and Nick could have uncovered any other predator conspiracy, and the story would have played out almost the same. That's the real problem. A twist villain should reshape how you view the story once you know the truth. Ernesto does that. Every rewatch of Coco feels different because his shadow looms over every scene. Bellwether gives you no such reward. Watch Zootopia again, and nothing changes. But creating relevance with a twist villain is one thing. Foreshadowing them so that their reveal is not unrealistic is another. While Coco did this to perfection through ways that are studied in film school, Zootopia's twist is also studied, just not for the right reasons, and here's exactly why. Foreshadowing is one of the most delicate tools in storytelling. It's the art of telling the audience what's coming without actually telling them. When done right, it rewards people for paying attention. It creates that satisfying moment where you realize the truth was staring you in the face all along. But when it's done poorly, it feels like a trick, a twist that comes out of nowhere and leaves you wondering if the writers made it up at the last minute. That's what separates Ernesto de la Cruz from Bellwether. Both were twist villains, but only one was foreshadowed with precision, care, and meaning. Let's start with Ernesto's massive clues. From the very first time we see him in Coco, the film is already whispering the truth about him. His white suit, the slick-backed hair, the perfect smile, all of it screams vanity. He looks like a man in love with his own reflection. The movie hides his arrogance in plain sight. It's in the way he moves, the way the camera frames him, and even in how he walks. Watch him closely in that famous concert scene. The most stunning piece of evidence comes when Miguel starts playing his guitar. The beautiful, genuine music instantly silences the entire party. A wave of reverence washes over the land of the dead, and the crowd parts, drawn toward the boy. But where is the world's greatest musician? Ernesto does not turn around to appreciate the melody. He's over on the side of the stage, ignoring the songs and gossiping with his guests.
The world is mi familia, for this music is my language.
It is an immediate signal that his true skill lies in social manipulation and performing for the elite crowd rather than actual music. He only turns when he realizes the attention of his own guests has shifted away from him. Instead of, in admiration, he looks at Miguel to figure out why he, Ernesto, is no longer the center of the universe. He then instantly grabs the spotlight back by making a dramatic show of jumping into the pool to save the boy. But we all know that his act of heroism is just a selfish performance designed to steal the applause. And when Miguel tells him he is his great-great-grandson, Ernesto is shocked, clearly confused. He eventually goes with the flow because, being the selfish and greedy man that he is, Ernesto probably has other forgotten children out there with several women, making him the kind of person who wouldn't even recognize his own family. Let's also forget the great publicity that would come with being a hero who saves his long-lost descendant.
I have a great-great-grandson?
And speaking of family, why the hell does he not leave the land of the dead during Dia de los Muertos? Everyone else crosses over to visit their families, but Ernesto stays behind to throw concerts for himself. That's brilliant foreshadowing. The man who craves to be remembered by everyone else has no one left who truly remembers him. But it gets even crazier. The movie leaves visual breadcrumbs everywhere. Take the family portrait. The guitar in the picture has a gold tooth inlaid in the design, the same detail Hector's skeleton carries. Even the Rivera family's missing belt buckle, which doesn't match Ernesto's, hints that something's off. And when Ernesto tries to give Miguel his blessing near the end, the marigold petal in his hand doesn't glow the way it does for Imelda. Another quiet sign that something is wrong with this so-called ancestor. All of these details and more make Ernesto's eventual turn feel real. Unfortunately, Bellwether's the complete opposite. There's no groundwork, emotional hints, or rhythm to her reveal. The movie hides her, but not in a clever way. It just forgets about her until the end. You could argue that Zootopia tries to plant small signals. She's pushed around by Mayor Lionheart, mocked, and constantly made to feel small. That dynamic mirrors the broader theme of prey versus predator. It's meant to make her eventual rise feel justified, but the film never connects that injustice to a clear personal motive. She never gets a moment where we feel her frustration, or a hint that she's capable of manipulation. So when she suddenly turns out to be the mastermind behind the predator attacks, it feels fake. Even the visual cues don't work the way they should. Bellwether's wardrobe darkens as the movie progresses, her soft colors turning into blacks and grays by the final act. That's an interesting touch, but it's so subtle that most viewers miss it completely. Her tone of voice stays the same, gentle, hesitant, and meek. Foreshadowing, at its core, is about expectation. Psychologically, our brains crave patterns. We want stories to make sense, to connect. When clues build quietly beneath the surface, we feel rewarded when the truth arrives because it matches our subconscious suspicions. That's why Ernesto's reveal hits so hard. It confirms a feeling we couldn't name. Bellwether's twist, meanwhile, violates that expectation. It introduces a pattern that wasn't there before, which leaves the audience startled but emotionally unmoved. Surprise without setup is momentary, whereas revelation with setup lasts. Ernesto's arc also proves something about great foreshadowing. It doesn't have to be hidden. Sometimes it works best when it's obvious but disguised as something else. The film distracts us with Miguel's journey, his family's disapproval, and the music ban, so we never question Ernesto's perfection. It's misdirection rooted in an emotional story. We don't see the warning signs because we, like Miguel, don't want to. That's what makes the betrayal sting. It plays on a simple psychological truth. When you admire someone, your mind filters out their flaws. The story uses that human weakness as a weapon. Bellwether never benefits from that emotional blind spot. The audience doesn't idolize or rely on her much, if at all. So there's nothing to lose when she betrays everyone. It's like hearing that the guy who hands out flyers in the background was secretly the CEO all along. It might be clever, but it's not moving. So we've spent 3 acts breaking down the DNA of a successful twist. We saw how Ernesto de la Cruz won the battle for presence, dominating the screen to earn our absolute trust. We saw how he mastered relevance, making his identity the emotional engine of the entire story. Most importantly, we saw how he perfected foreshadowing, embedding clues that confirm his awful character without spoiling the surprise. All of it leads to the final piece, the moment that cements Ernesto's legacy and leaves Bellwether forgotten. This final part answers the questions. What happens to the story when their mask falls off? And what does their reveal say about the world they lived in? This is, ladies and gentlemen, where Ernesto cements himself as unforgettable, and where Bellwether fades into nothingness. Ernesto's turn exposes what he's always been rather than changing who he is. From the very beginning, his vanity, perfection, and charm were his entire identity. When the movie finally shows that he poisoned Hector and stole his songs, it doesn't make you rethink the character's behavior because there have always been hints of his wickedness. It just makes you see it clearly for the first time. The confidence now looks like ego, the inspiration now sounds like theft, and the smile becomes a mask, but not one that hides a different man. rather one that protects the same man from being found out. That's what makes his twist genius. The Ernesto we meet at the start and the Ernesto we see at the end are the same person. The only difference is that now we understand what his charm was built on.
You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to seize your moment.
And that's why his reveal feels honest. Coco never lied to the audience. It just lets us lie to ourselves. We wanted to believe in him because Miguel did. We wanted to believe in his dream of greatness because we saw pieces of our own ambition in it. That's what betrayal really is, a mirror we're forced to look into. Ernesto's fall hurts because it reflects something real about people: the hunger for attention, the need to be seen, and the fear of being forgotten. Another brilliant thing about Ernesto's twist is that it ripples through the entire story. Every scene before the turn takes on a new meaning. When Miguel first plays Ernesto's Remember Me, you know now that it was stolen. You realize that the ban in the family came from a misunderstanding created by Ernesto's lies. Even Hector's fading memory becomes part of Ernesto's legacy, because his betrayal was big enough to echo across generations. It is also because of Ernesto that Miguel learns that fame without love means nothing. The Rivera family finds their way back to music, something they'd buried under years of pain. Hector gets remembered again. Even Mama Coco's broken memory sparks back to life when she hears the song. The twist brings healing. That's a twist that makes sense. Now, compare that with Bellwether. Her twist feels like a complete personality swap. The shy, mousy assistant we meet at the start suddenly vanishes. She's portrayed as powerless, more secretary than leader, trying to sound helpful while never being taken seriously.
Oh, no, but sir, you do have a meeting with her. Sir, if I could just
And then, out of nowhere, once her mask drops, she reappears as a completely different person. Now she commands an army of armed rams, speaks with confidence, and plots with precision.
We'll be unstoppable.
The timid bureaucrat disappears, replaced by a villain straight out of another movie. The distance between those two versions of her is so extreme that the turn feels like the writers flipped a switch. And as far as legacy is concerned, she doesn't have a powerful effect. When she's caught, the city just resets. Order is restored. The story wraps up neatly, almost too neatly. You never think about her again once the movie ends. There's no moral scar, no lingering question. It's what you could call a mechanical fix. It ties up the loose ends, solves the mystery, and resets the tone. Nothing in the film feels heavier or deeper because of her. In the end, Ernesto's twist stands as a masterclass in how to write a perfect twist villain, while Bellwether stands at the opposite end, already forgotten. These two might not be the best examples for writing a villain you can't hate, but this video right here shows the exact way and the right villains to use to write an antagonist the audience has no choice but to love.